to start right off the top with something that Pat Lodra said, and she is Newtown's first selectman. And this is what she had to say, anticipating this anniversary. Our village of Sandy Hook was harmed irreparably by the chokehold that media traffic had on us for 10 days during the buying season of the year for those shops. And there is the emotional impact. Clearly, to be reminded in such a stark way of this horrible anniversary. We don't need this. We live this every day. We know what happened here. Her message, very plain: stay away, media. Should the media stay away? What's your sense?
Well, sure. And I think the media should stay away for a couple of reasons. One is that when you go to the site of a violent event the year afterward and you start interviewing the people who were closest to the event, what you're really doing is you're gathering up a type of emotional pornography. You're dragging up the event again and you're reliving it because we in media know that content sells, and it's cheap, and it's a cheap, easy way to do the 1 year after story. I think in forcing the media to stay away, the people of Newtown are actually telling the media, we want you to do your jobs. We want you to actually do journalism that matters. We want you to help us as a nation understand this event in ways that just watching images of flickering candles and tearful people in prayer and a litany of the dead doesn't get us to. And so I think what they're saying, in addition to we need our privacy, we have to deal with this every day, I think what they're also saying is go out and do real journalism around this issue.
And did you see, if you think back, we've had a number of these incidents, unfortunately, Virginia Tech comes to mind, Columbine. What happened around those anniversaries in terms of the press's coverage of them? I know here in terms of September 11th, every year, as a journalist, since that happened, I've done some sort of anniversary coverage of it. What's your sense of how these events have been handled?
Well, the anniversary of a violent event is an important date. And so for journalists or for people who have been part of that event, who experienced it, it's important for different reasons. So most of the time, yes, there's a public commemoration of some kind, and the journalists show up and they cover that commemoration as a way of marking the time of the passing time. Now, the thing is that that's not really journalism. It's a mere observation that here's what everybody's doing to mark this particular event. And in Newtown, they're saying, because we don't want the media here, we're not having a public event. The difference is, first of all, Newtown is so close to New York, and New York is the media capital of the world, that there would be, I think, probably the biggest congregation of media for any anniversary outside of September 11th that we've seen. In addition to that, I think because it was small children, 6-year-olds, not high school age, not adults in a movie theater, right. I think there's a particular emotional power to that is really painful for the people who experienced it, and also easy to manipulate in terms of getting people to click on or watch video. And so because of all that, this event is different. On top of that, there's one more thing that's different, and that's that there's more media now than there ever has been. And so there's more of us. Even though there's less of us in the profession, there's BuzzFeed, there's Gawker, there's Huffington Post, there's more quasi-media out there.
And is it your sense, I know you study how consumers use news and what they want to see, is it your sense that consumers actually want to hear from these families? We had this discussion in our production meeting about whether or not the media should or shouldn't go, and would we be sort of not delivering to our readers if we didn't hear directly from those families? What's your sense of what readers and consumers of news want to hear in terms of the stories from Newtown?
Well, I think that the stories of how the families are doing are particularly powerful, and yes, consumers definitely want to hear from them. But those families have to be able to control how and when they share their stories, and they can't have 10,000 reporters showing up on their doorstep. Many of the families have their own blogs. Some of them have shared essays with the local newspaper, and those will be distributed. The Associated Press is distributing some of their experiences. So yes, we benefit. We, the rest of society, benefit when we hear from them. But how that happens is what we're talking about here, not whether we hear from them.
And news organizations have made decisions about whether or not to go. You mentioned the Associated Press. They will be in Newtown, apparently. ABC News has decided to stay away, CNN as well. I talked to our national editor here. We won't be sending someone to Newtown. We will be looking at events that happen here at the National Cathedral and just how gun violence and sort of the gun control debate has played out over this last year. CBS News will be there, and the New York Times had this statement from Tim Gauguin of CBS News. He says, our goal is to have the smallest footprint possible. We don't want to be intrusive, but we're confident we can report the story and not get in the way. Is that possible?
Well, sure. And the fewer media that show up, the more possible that is. I mean, when you think about the 10 days after the Newtown shooting and what that was like, it was an absolute chokehold on that community. There were so many people there. And if you, as a journalist, have ever been part of that sort of pack journalism where everybody is covering an event, you realize that it feeds on itself. You know, somebody goes walking into a diner and like 20 people try and interview that person.
Yes, pack journalism.
And that kind of journalism is not going to reveal anything new about how Newtown is doing or what we've experienced. But if you've done your homework ahead of time, if you have relationships with people in the town, and you're going to show up and you're going to talk to them, and they've invited you in, they've agreed to talk to you, then you're going to have maybe a different perspective. It's not going to be a competition as much as it is going to be an experience of the people who've built relationships with the sources closest to the story are going to get the best story.
And those probably more likely local media than national media parachuting in.
Maybe, maybe not. I mean, there are some national media. I mean, I believe the Washington Post did a really,
We did. Eli Saslow's story, probably, I mean, one of the best stories out of Newtown that I've read.
Right. So he obviously developed relationships in order to tell that story, and he still has those relationships. Right. He could probably do a story on the anniversary of Newtown based on those relationships that would be very different than everybody else's story.
Is there a difference between print and television? I mean, for television, you obviously have those huge satellite trucks that we all are familiar with, and print folks can come in with their notebooks in a more quiet way.
Well, and TV can be unobtrusive if they choose to be. They don't need to bring the satellite truck, right? They can not do it live. They can do something ahead of time. TV has production values, and those production values tend to be more invasive than like what we're doing here, where we're doing video, but it doesn't involve a lot of equipment and a lot of people. It's low-tech video, if you will. TV does high-tech video for the most part, which sometimes means lights, big trucks, lots of people, producers, cameramen, all of that. But it doesn't have to be that way. They done well, you don't need an entire crew.
And Emily Bazelon of Slate Magazine, she had a very novel idea in terms of talking about the pack journalism, right, and how to deal with that and how to have a smaller footprint. And this is what she wrote a year ago. For a story like Newtown, I'd propose, say, a dozen reporters, not one or two. You'd want enough people to knock on doors and go to coffee shops to find the people who want to talk. They exist, and their voices are crucial and sometimes searing. They are our conduit to understanding and to empathy. But we don't need reporters blocking the front door to a vigil ceremony. We don't need to clog a small city of 27,000 with traffic and satellite trucks. When the press turns into a pack, when we swarm a story like this, we stress out victims and their neighbors for no good reason, and we make people hate us. Also, we do a disservice to our whole professional purpose. What do you make of that? Her idea in a nutshell is that we should handle this almost like a press pool, in the way
Right.
that the press pool covers the president, and it's 10 or 12 people, and you have a rotation. What's your sense of that idea?
So that's a great idea, and the only time it works is when it is forced upon us. We in the media do not get together and do things like this voluntarily. I wish we did. And I think that you could probably get buy-in from about 50% of the players, but you would inevitably get somebody who would go rogue on that
Right.
situation. And then once one organization went rogue, other organizations would go rogue, because there is money to be made here. And media is a business, and it is very hard to set aside your business principles for some other higher social principles, even though I think that's absolutely, journalism should do that because it's a higher calling, right? It has a function that's critical to the democratic survival of a society. But we don't do that. We are an unregulated profession, and the only time that we abide by pools are when someone like the White House or the Supreme Court force pools on us because of the physical limitations of an event.
Yeah, of the space. Kelly McBride of Poynter, thank you so much for joining me today and talking about this very important issue, the anniversary of Newtown, and how we should cover it. Take good care.
Thanks for having me.